It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Welcome to The New Next, a podcast that addresses current events and how they will impact the future. Welcome back to the 2023.
Yeah. It's like we time traveled or something.
I know, it's been a year since we've talked.
It has been a while. We've taken most of December off. Right?
We did early December, and then we've just been pretty much enjoying the holidays as much as we can or getting sick. First thing we should talk about is what happened on the 2-year anniversary of January 6th and how Kevin McCarthy finally, after 100 rounds, got elected as Speaker of the House.
That was amazing. Do you want to kick it off and did you watch it live?
No, I have more of a life than that.
I don't, Mike. We were watching it live here. C-SPAN.
Yeah, I kept up with it after rounds 3, like after that first day or whatever. I started looking at updates on my phone every couple hours just to see what happened or didn't happen. I don't know how, like when it was going on, it seemed so crazy because historically, I think the longest it had ever taken before this year was a total of 5 or 6 rounds. That was 100 years ago.
Yeah. So that was 1923, I believe. And that was 5 or 6 rounds. But the longest besides that was 1856, right before the Civil War. And I think that went longer than this, but I don't know the exact count.
So for those who somehow didn't get to see this information or don't know where we're talking about it, the Republicans won the House of Representatives in the last election by a fairly slim margin. And basically they needed, for Congress, for House to be able to act, they have to have a Speaker of the House. And the Speaker has to get a thin majority, like it doesn't have to be super majority or anything, but just needs 50% plus 1 of all the people, all the Republicans to vote.
Of all of Congress. Yeah.
And 5 Republicans, I think it was like he needed all but 3 Republicans to vote for him.
So basically you either need enough people to vote for you or enough people to vote for you and also vote present. So it went to a scenario where they stopped voting for people. So those presidents basically lowered the total vote threshold. And rather than voting for Jim Jordan or something, they just voted present. And yeah, that's like what I think we know a lot more about this because we've been in Toastmasters for years, and Toastmasters and Congress used augmented Robert's Rule of Order. So it's very similar in how they do their motions and everything. So it's basically watching a big Toastmasters meeting.
Yeah, it looks like Boebert was the one that ultimately caved in by marking present to give Mark McCarthy the speakership.
It was actually Gates.
Was it Gates?
Yeah. So I watched this real time and I was just sitting there. I was like, oh, I'm sitting there. And I actually recorded some off my phone because I was going in between the garage and inside. So I recorded some of it, but there was a part where it almost broke out into, I don't know if you saw that.
Maybe, I don't know it depends on which one you're talking about.
McCarthy, or the last 2 votes the other night, the second vote was successful, but the first vote, I guess they had negotiated with Gates where Gates was supposed to vote present, and then he ended up voting for someone. One of McCarthy's top lieutenants from Alabama basically came over and had to be held back because he was trying to physically fight Gates. And there's decorum rules in Congress. That guy is going to face some serious penalties for that. This was a weird experience because it was the cast of characters that I feel like I am very critical of quite often. And I think that was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. So it's being scared in the media and stuff. But for the last 100 years, our Congress especially hasn't been operating in the manner it intended to. Some of the stuff that they basically negotiated on there, I think these are very consequential to essentially the functioning of government going forward. Budget bills will stop the endless increasing in debt ceiling and hold the Senate for accountable for the same. Just that alone, if we're going into a period where austerity matters in government, there's so many different factors to look around how that plays out. So we remember a couple years ago when they did the 5% basically cut for government, what chaos that caused. Term limits will be put up for a vote. And I assume this means for all of Congress. But think about how that would change if a Pelosi, for instance, wouldn't be in there for 30, 40 years plus.
Yeah.
You're talking about their approach is trying to turn this back more into the people's house. And I think this is very intriguing.
Yeah. Term limits alone are something I've always been for, depending on how many years they give for term limits. But even almost every form of government, elected government, has term limits except for U.S. Congress, U.S. Senate, and U.S. House of Rep. There are exceptions at different states and stuff, but everybody has term limits. And It's funny that we haven't had that in the past.
I would personally be against it for the Senate, and I would be open to lowering Senate from 6 to 4 years, although I do enjoy the 6. So here's my philosophy on this. I have a lot of respect for the Senate, but I don't feel like the Senate ever really manages things like budgets. Besides one person in particular, I'll never vote for a senator for president. And that's just a rule there. If I have an option, I like to vote for governors or people that have experience managing large organizations. And senators, I feel, is a lot more backroom dealing. With the Senate, it benefits having people there longer term and more of a collegial atmosphere. I feel like there's certain capabilities that you could succeed in the Senate that doesn't necessarily apply to other things. I voted for one senator for president in my life, one person.
If you voted in the 2008 election, the two major candidates were both senators, so
yeah, I know.
No matter which one you chose.
I could have voted for another party.
So I said the two major parties.
But I didn't. And to go through this again, beyond this, the Texas border plan will be put before Congress. This is such a hot button issue that I think it's weird because I think polling wise, this Texas border plan is extremely popular. But this is one of those things that it doesn't get to the floor because of political, ideological entrenchment. Church-style committee will be convened to look into FBI and CIA. With the Church Commission back in the 60s, didn't have a lot of tooth to it. I think most people, except for people in the government, will be very intrigued to see potential outcomes from that. They have the Jeffersonian motion coming back in, where one vote from a single member of Congress can bring a motion to remove the Speaker of the House. I think this is awesome. We're going more, I think, into the realms of House Commons in a way. It's obviously going to be more chaotic, but this is how our government was framed to function. I think it's very interesting. COVID mandates will be ended and funding for them, including the emergency funding. I think a lot of people enjoy this because most of that funding isn't going to anything medical related. And then the final thing is bills presented to Congress will be single subject, not omnibus, with all the earmarks included when they're presented. And there will be a minimum 72 hours to read them. I think this is probably the most important thing you're talking about clean bills that they pass are actually potentially going to include what they're branded as, rather than military bills being presented as parks funding or something.
Yeah, it'll be interesting on that because, one, of course, that's not law in Congress. That's just the concessions that McCarthy made to get elected speaker, correct?
On Monday, they essentially have to vote on these rules.
I'm sure the Democrats are going to be, and some of them I can definitely see them potentially backing, because Republicans, they don't have enough of a majority that they can vote, because they still need 66%.
No, they just need a majority.
A simple majority?
Yeah.
It'll be interesting then. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of McCarthy personally, but
I'm not a big fan of a lot of these guys.
But then again, there's been very few speakers that, I don't know, ever since Tip O'Neill, I don't know if there's really been a speaker that looked for the, and that's putting a bias on Tip. That's probably not fair either, but I don't think most speakers look out for the country. They look out for their own well-being. And Tip O'Neill, he would battle both the Republican and the Democrat presidents on certain aspects and everything. He wasn't, even though he was definitely Democrat, it was just a different kind of world. I think of, because we've had, since Tip O'Neill, we had Gingrich, then we had Boehner. I can't remember who the one was in between them. Do you remember who was between Gingrich and Boehner?
Sorry, I spilled coffee all over myself.
That's basically what Congress did recently. And then they had Pelosi, then Paul Ryan, and then Pelosi again. Let's see.
Paul Ryan was
Hastert. That's right. I forgot about Hastert.
Pedophile. Kind of brush that one under the rug.
Yeah.
If you want to see a sick story of abuse of power, read about Dennis Hastert.
I mean, you could say that pretty much about a lot of, yeah. So the last person to have, now technically Pelosi is the most recent one to have more than 3 terms, but it just was split. Boehner had 3 terms. Ryan had 2 terms. Hastert had 4 terms. Wow.
Yeah,
and Gingrich had 2 terms.
Powerful. Hastert was arguably the most powerful speaker ever. You probably have Pelosi up there. I think Pelosi was a lot more legitimate of a character.
Oh yeah,
all the way around.
Hastert had Tom the Hammer, what's his name? Tom DeLay, to do his bidding. Yeah, I think it's because of how quickly I remember Boehner fighting Obama specifically and having some issues and stuff, and then it's like as soon as he got out of office, there's a health factor. And Boehner was really the first speaker that had to start dealing with, I'm going to use this term, though I don't think they use it anymore, but the Tea Party. And that's what we have, the Gates, Boebert, Marjorie Taylor Greene. They're a hyper Tea Party, and Boehner had more stress dealing with them than he had with dealing with the rest of Congress. And
I think that's a good comparison to now.
And McCarthy was one of Boehner's top lieutenants, and Paul Ryan obviously was the one that more people would remember, but Kevin McCarthy was the one that did a lot of the fighting for McCarthy, and that's actually one of the reasons why the 5 people who held up, it was because of what McCarthy did for Boehner during Boehner's time. That one of the main reasons why they did not want to support McCarthy. And that part I found really interesting, because that was 10 years ago, and yet and I mean, they have a legitimate point where McCarthy has not stood up with his own promises and stuff in the past. I can't remember the guy's name from Arizona, but I watched a video from him where he talked about why he would never vote for McCarthy.
That was Andy Biggs.
Yeah, Biggs.
Yeah.
And
that guy doesn't like him much.
Yeah.
I think he did vote for him.
Did he?
Yeah, he ended up voting for him.
But it also scares me a little bit about how much power Gates still has in the midst of everything else that's going on.
I guess he got cleared of all that stuff that I'm not a huge fan of anybody that exploits anybody in general, but especially anybody underage. But yeah, I guess he got cleared of that stuff. So I don't know. It seems like everybody in Congress has their thing that you're like, did they do this or did they not?
Yeah, and I don't want to turn it straight into gossip or anything, but
It was the battle of the best hairs in Congress. That's for sure. McCarthy versus Gates.
Yeah, it was funny though, because again, since I didn't watch it live, I was just watching news reports, and I watched all the different networks, and Fox was just basically stating, man, what's wrong with the Republican Party right now? Freaking get together and elect whoever. But the CNN, actually I didn't watch MSNBC, but CNN, they were like, yep, we are never going to see McCarthy be the Speaker of the House. And I was like, you guys are pretty certain about this. And I don't agree, because like even watching what was happening at the time, I was like, I don't know about that. I would have been more surprised if McCarthy was not Speaker of the House.
Yeah.
And I never felt differently from that the whole time that I paid attention to everything going on.
Who else is going to be it? Like the only other person that, and I don't even think he could get it, it would be Trump.
No.
He was nominated. He's the only other person that could probably get potentially to that threshold, and I think it would probably be more difficult than McCarthy because he doesn't know shit.
Well,
doesn't know how government works.
And not just even that. There was nobody else really running for Speaker of the House. And you have to want that position to be able to be Speaker. If you don't, because it's a stupid thing. It's like being president. You have to be stupid to actually want the job, but you have to want it, because you don't want to elect somebody who doesn't want the job, because they're not going to do what's best for that job if they don't even have a desire at all. Now, obviously, people can get on the wrong course.
To your point, I think part of the criticism of McCarthy was that he wanted it for himself. He wanted it too bad. And McCarthy, since a little kid, I believe, has always wanted to be Speaker of the House, not president or anything. This is what he's always wanted to do. He's built his whole career to this point. And moving in to the Speaker's office before you're Speaker, first off, it was really
a very
weird.
Flawed person.
I've been a huge critic of Matt Gaetz and Lauren Boebert and those folks, but I personally give them a lot of credit for what went on the last couple days. Like, you take out the personality and character for it, they're really standing for something. And they also told Trump F off, which it was nice to see that they actually care. Like, you can disagree with people all day, but I don't think that hypothetically Gates could be doing this for the presidential run or something. I don't think he can win personally, but it's I was really impressed by them. I was impressed by their strategy. I was impressed by what they got. I think this would have not happened had McCarthy not acted totally entitled to it. Yeah, and moved into the office and stuff. It's just, I think so I compare Jeffries to, so the whole Jeffries with the speech, the passing of the torch, Jeffries basically praising the people that mentored him, giving adequate respect to Speaker Pelosi. That's a speech. I haven't saved it yet, but I'm going to save that and add it to my bank. And I'm going to be listening to that for years. From that aspect, I thought it was a perfect night for them. And I also thought on the Republican side, it was almost a perfect night, a culmination in a way too, because you have one party going to the future, and then you have another party essentially battling the past to install the past. And I think that they really got a lot of fundamental changes on there. So it's, for me watching it, I was like, this is passing the torch in both parties. And like, I was sitting there, I think I texted Joel about during Jeffrey's speech, and I was like, man, this is amazing. This is his best speech at his biggest moment. It's the biggest. Right. I was sitting there, and I love like watching the Olympics, love watching people step up and succeed when they build their whole life around it. And Jeffries is very like McCarthy. And the fact that he's been a man behind the scenes, like you said earlier with McCarthy, with Boehner, really helping to get this stuff going. But Jeffries is, I don't know, that was cool. He's totally different than Obama, totally different character, but I felt similar feelings to watching that speech as when I watched Obama's DNC speech years ago. And I was just like, man, we're entering a new age here.
Yeah.
And I felt it was very that contrast of old versus new. And then also bringing out old is new, is this new rules procedures that's going to change. It's fundamentally going to change everything. Like from the outside, it might not look, but for...
it definitely will.
I've been watching C-SPAN for 30 years. I watched C-SPAN the other night, and it was just vote tallies and noise on the floor, no commentary. It's the procedural stuff is how government is implemented. And I don't know, man, maybe this renewed my faith in government a little bit, like on both sides. Like I know these next couple years are going to be insane and everything, but I am so excited.
I think the things that I hesitate on, and the media echoes a couple of these things, so I'm not going to pretend like I'm unique in this thought, but a lot of this stuff could have been taken care of before the vote. Now, absolutely, McCarthy, he moved in his office before he elected. That's just scum. I'm surprised they let him.
Gates wrote a letter to the Capitol architect being like, how is he allowed to do this? Nobody elected him speaker.
Yeah. And so that means McCarthy's already shown the kind of leader he's going to be, ultimately self-serving. And you kind of highlighted some of that. But some of this in
a narcissistic way. So he may have to give up things that benefit everybody else to get his narcissistic view of what he wants to be in his life, and may end up benefiting everybody.
We'll see. You're more optimistic on it than I am. I think you are a compilation of everything you've done and everything that's been done to you. And I'm not saying people can't change, but I think whenever you have a history of doing something a certain way, it's going to take a long time for people to recognize that you're no longer that same person you were before. And I'm actually putting that towards Boebert and Gates and the five, because it might look good right now, but you can't tell me that they care about the American people any more than they did 3 months ago or 4 months ago with some of the different things that have been said. There's still a lot of trust building that they're going to need to do for me to be like, oh, wow, they really do look for America first, as opposed to their little selfish group of of things. Now, I'm not defending McCarthy in this, because again, I think he's scum before moving his office.
So my opinion with government is I question people that want to be in. I'm very skeptical of people that want to be in government these days anyways.
You're talking about elected government?
Yeah, that want to be in office. So I'm just like, for me, that's, if someone was like, hey, I'll give you a lot of money, but you have to stab needles in your eyes all day. That's how I view as being someone in Congress. It seems one of the worst jobs that I can imagine doing personally, but I'd rather do physical labor all day personally. But all right, let's
I'm the exact opposite. See, I think it would be such and I know what I'm saying and how it's going to be heard differently. I think being able to be a senator or a rep is such a noble thing, but because it's become so distorted, we've Frank Underwooded everything. Yeah. And I'm not saying that there haven't always been rats and stuff, but
I 100% agree with you.
And again, of course, this is part of my problem as a whole. I'm a Mr. Deeds type person. Like, no, the American people deserve the best, and we got to do what we got to do to bring the nation together because it's America. I still have these weird hopes. That's why Captain America is still my hero. I still hope that America can be what we once said it was, but we can go on forever talking about this,
Well,
and it's really inconsequential right now.
Yeah, my view is I feel politics is a meat grinder. You throw in beef, veal, and pork, and
You got
mush it all
sausage.
together, and then you get something else that, you get pork sausage, right? So you get a bunch of money that's thrown around all over the place and pieces here and there, and it's ugly and it's inefficient, but it's, in my opinion, by far the best system that we have in the world. So from what I thought about coming in this year, we have so much revolutionary energy and stuff like that all over the world, every single country. People are basically trying to play Game of Thrones. To see what I see as representatives of the people in the people's house, even though they're not necessarily the people I would choose to bring this forward, what other people that I am friends with that are huge fans of this group have been saying about them is basically what I felt I saw this week. Sometimes I do really agree with some of the stuff that they do. And I think the squad on the other side, AOC, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, and Rashida Tlaib, and so they're an extreme group of the progressives. I agree with a lot of stuff that they say too, like all the time. And then I probably agree less on both sides with the policy. But I can't just, with the approach that I take to life, if I'm going to be honest to who I want to be, I can't judge the outcome of what I saw, which I think is really positive for America and withholding our best selves in terms of this whole electorate thing and reflecting what the citizens want. Can't be critical of that because I don't like the speaker.
Oh yeah, no, I and again, even that's a more optimistic view than I think I could personally take, and mostly because of gerrymandering.
I'm proud of them, man.
But I hear what you say, and I think part of it, I still probably primarily identify with the Republican Party, even though I'm not Republican. A lot of my system and stuff, so I'm a lot more critical of them.
Yeah,
I recognize a lot of them stuff that's bad about the Democrat Party, but I've never claimed Democrats as my own. So to me, it's, even though there's people that inspire me from that group from time to time, I don't consider myself a Democrat. I'm registered independent. I've done that since after the 2000 election. I registered independent. I was Republican at the time. So I'm a lot more critical of the Republicans specifically because they are the ones that's my home seat or whatever. If you would like to learn more about the New Next podcast, find us at thenewnextpodcast.com, where you can suggest a topic you would like for us to cover. If you enjoyed what you heard, share the podcast, tell a friend about it, or rate us with 5 stars.